The TRIFOLD double-sided pamphlet is a compact, foldable print piece that offers multiple panels for organising detailed information. As part of event print design collateral, this format can be essential for helping attendees navigate an event and stay informed about schedules, locations, and key highlights. The TRIFOLD format allows you to clearly present a lot of information in an easy-to-read, organised layout while still maintaining a portable, pocket-sized format. This is important because it enhances the attendee experience, ensuring they can easily access the event's essential details and enjoy a smooth, informed visit. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to design an event floor plan map from scratch using some simple yet powerful tools in InDesign. We'll cover setting up your document, adding text, visual elements, and even adding some design flair. So here I am in InDesign, and here is an event floor plan map open that we are going to develop in this video. Now, this design is part of a series of branded stationery we'll be creating on this course for a fictional design exhibition event. To create this TRIFOLD pamphlet in InDesign, we're going to cover the following key steps. Now, this is a methodical process that will ensure we create quality design and not leave anything unchecked. So be sure to check the bookmarks in this video so you can jump back or ahead at any time. After this video, you'll be able to create an event floor plan map in Adobe InDesign super easy. So let's get into it. So up to this point on the course, we have created some fairly straightforward publications. In previous videos, we created a business card, a letterhead, a poster, a flyer, and some social media posts, to name a few. Now, the TRIFOLD pamphlet is where things can start to get a little more challenging, because not only are we dealing with a double-sided print, but now multiple spreads, folds, and the order in which content is laid out. The goal when creating a pamphlet is to manage all the content in a way that makes it clear and easy to comprehend, and present information in a strategic order to help a reader digest information quickly. As I scroll down, you can see I have a pamphlet with side 1 on the top and side 2 below. If we look in the Pages panel, we can see the contents of this document and how many pages are contained. For this project, we're creating a pamphlet for a fictional design expo event, which will include information attendees will need to be aware of to navigate the day. For the look and feel, we're going to take reference from the brand media kit that is included as part of this course. We will be including some of the brand motif and color elements as part of the design. We'll also be using some of the design elements we have already developed previously in the course. If you want to take a look at this document and get all the assets and follow along, you can get access to this document from the course download folder. This download folder comes with multiple projects and a ton of assets and resources we will be using in this course. You can find the link to acquire the folder from the description. With the download folder open, click into folder 4 project, into the design expo folder, click into folder 2 event publication design, and open the event design InDesign file. This is a document that contains all the publication designs we'll be creating for this course. If we scroll down to the event stationery page, we can see a variety of documents. For this video, we are going to look at the pamphlet document. So with the selection tool, I'll select the pamphlet thumbnail. Now I'll either come to the links panel and click Edit Original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail, and the document will open up in its own tab. Now for this document, I'm using the font Base New. If you have not already downloaded the fonts for this course, this is a free font that you can acquire online. To get this font, I would recommend you check out the course PDF fonts page on the course PDF document. This is a list of all the fonts that are used in this course and where to get them. Simply click on the Base New link and this will take you straight to where you can download it. Simply close this document, install the fonts, open it back up again, and you should be able to follow along just fine. So when we start to develop publications with multiple spreads, we need to give some thought as to how everything is going to be laid out so it will be presented in a clear way when printed and folded. On the first spread, we have a fairly complex layout with lots of visual information. And on the second spread, we have another fairly complex layout with a map and various text elements. In this instance, the cover page is on the far right of the first spread, and the back page is next to it, in the middle on the left. This is because of the unique way in which the pamphlet will be printed and folded. If we quickly look at the numbering of the pages in theory, we can see it initially looks odd, however makes sense when folded. When the pamphlet is presented, it will be the front page that will be seen first, the third page on the first spread. When the first page opens, it will reveal the next page, the first page on the second spread. Then the eye will move across to see the next page, the first page on the first spread. Then when the user opens up the next page, they will see the full inside spread. If they close the pamphlet and turn over, they will see the back page, the middle page on the first spread. So when working on a print publication that has multiple folds, one has to be careful of where the content is placed on the spreads to create an effective flow. Another thing to be careful when working on documents like this in InDesign are your pages and your spreads. If we look over in the Pages panel, we can see that even though this document is a double-sided print, it actually consists of 6 individual pages, and the pages have been placed next to each other to create 2 spreads of 3 pages. So instead of creating one seamless canvas size, I've created one spread with multiple pages. Now this is really important when working on documents like this. Using individual pages will allow you to treat each page individually to apply its own grid system, margin space, and also when you export, you will be able to get all the correct crop marks, which will help the printer fold the document. So if I press W to toggle between preview and normal mode, in normal mode we can see that there is quite a few things going on behind the scenes. If I toggle off the visibility of all the layers, we can see the grid structure. To help structure and align my elements, I have used a 6-column grid on the first page and a 2-column grid on pages 2 and 3. Remember, using individual pages will allow you to set a column grid for each page separately and apply specific margins. If I toggle back on the visibility of the layers, we can see I have also used a baseline grid which fits inside the margin grid around the inside. If we look over in the layers panel, we can see 4 layers, one for type, one for base grid, and one for base images. This pamphlet includes a lot of visual elements, so the layers have been set up in this way to make it easy to organize and manage them. And if we look at the character and paragraph styles panel, we have some styles here formatting our text, and we also have some in the object styles panel. So let's see how we can create a document like this. To begin, I'm going to come up to File, New, and create a new document. Now when creating a new document in InDesign, you can choose from a range of presets. For this pamphlet, it's going to be folded down to the size of A5. So in this instance, I'm going to go with an A5 sheet. I'll click the Print tab and choose A5. Over in the parameters, I'll set the units to millimeters. I'll make sure the orientation is set to portrait. I don't want facing pages, so I'll make sure this is unchecked. I'm going to set the pages to 3. For the margin space, I'll click to lock the parameters across them all. I'll set the top to 14 mil, and that should set the rest to 14. I'll click down on my bleeding slug, type in 3 mils for all parameters, click create, and my document will open. So looking back at my previous document, we can see that I have the pages seamlessly next to each other. Now by default, when creating pages in InDesign, they will always be treated separately and placed under each other. First, I'll need to address them to make them sit next to each other. So I'll come over to the Pages panel, I'll click on the top right menu, scroll down, and currently we can see a tick next to Allow Document Pages to Shuffle. I'll click this to remove the tick. Then in the Pages panel, I'll click on my second page and just drag it up next to my first page. When I see a line next to the page, I'll release and that will snap the page next to it. And you will also see this page will be immediately next to the page in the work area. Next, I'll come to page 3, drag it up next to page 2, and now we have a seamless canvas area on 3 pages. Now for this document, I'll need a second spread for the other side of the document. So with my initial 3 pages set up, I'll come to the Pages panel, click on the first page, press and hold Shift to select page 3, right click, click on Duplicate Spread, and now we have our spread for the front and inside. And if I press W on the keyboard to toggle on Preview and Normal Mode, we can see our margin space around the inside of each page and the bleed line around the outside of the pages. Great. So looking back at my final pamphlet, if I press W, I can toggle between normal and preview mode. In normal mode, we can see the grid that I have used to structure the pamphlet content. For this approach, on page 1, I have 6 columns, and on page 2 and 3, I have gone for a 2-column grid. And I've also used a baseline grid, which will allow me to align things vertically. So now I'm going to come into my InDesign preferences, click on Units and Increments, and I'll set this to millimeters for horizontal and vertical. If you're following along, I suggest you do the same so you can match what I will be doing next. So back in my new document, I'll come over to the Pages panel and double click on the parent page. So right now it's currently set to only 1 page. By default, when you set up a document in InDesign, you will also get a parent page with 1 page. But this can be easily changed by coming over to the parent page in the Pages panel, right click and click on Parent Options. When the menu appears, I'll simply type in 3 at the bottom, click OK, and now my parent page will match the canvas spread area. Okay, so first I'll come and click the first parent page to just select the first one. I'll come up to layout and click margins and columns. I'll set the columns to 6 and set the gutter to 0 and click OK. Next, I'll click on page 2 in the parent pages and click page 3 while holding shift to select them both. I'll come back up to layout and click margins and columns. I'll set the columns to 2 and set the gutter to 0 and click OK. Back into the parent pages, I'll click page 1, press and hold shift and click the third page. I'll come back up to layout and scroll down and click create guides. In the menu, I'll make sure to click to turn on the preview. For rows, I'll first set the gutter to 0 and I'll set the number to 40. I'll make sure to hit the check mark for fit gutters to margins. I'll click OK. And if I double click on a page in the pages panel, the grid will be applied to both spreads. Perfect. So once I have my document set up, I can now start thinking about working with visual elements. Now, depending on the nature of a design, this can influence whether you start working with type or image. Looking back at the final design, if I toggle off the visibility of the type and images layer, we can see that the overall design is structured in what appears to be a stroke base grid, which is used to compartmentalize all the elements. So for this approach, I'm going to start with the base grid structure and then work my way upwards. So to kick off any document, I'll always start with my layer structure. I'll come into the layers panel, double click on the current layer, and since I'm starting with my base layer, I'll call this base stroke grid. Now looking back at the final design, you can see that there's quite a distinct style for this. On the first spread, the grid comes in from the top left of the first page and finishes on the bottom right of the third page with space around. And inside, there are lots of vertical and horizontal strokes on each page. Back in my document, I'll grab the rectangle tool. I'm going to start outside of my canvas at the top left of the first page. I'm going to make sure that I click roughly in the middle of this margin space on the left. I'll click and drag down and then across into the third page, again in the middle of the margin space on the bottom on the right. Upon release, I now have a simple box frame carefully positioned on my spread. I'll come over to the tools panel. I'll make sure the stroke is selected, and for now I'll just come and set this to black with a stroke size of 0.5. And if I press W on the keyboard to toggle between normal and preview mode, we can see my stroke outline there. Now for this grid, I also want some vertical lines. So I'll come over and grab the stroke tool from the menu, and I'll just start by clicking and dragging down while holding shift to draw a straight line from the top left side of my first page inside the margin space. Again, I'll make sure the stroke is set to black with a size of 0.5. With the selection tool, I'll drag the stroke while holding shift plus alt across and place one in the margin space on the left on page 2. I'll drag another to place in the margin space on the left on page 2, and then a last one across in the margin space on the left on page 1. Now for this grid, I need some horizontal lines. I'll grab the stroke tool from the menu, and I'll just start by clicking and dragging across while holding shift to draw a straight line from one side of my box to the other on page 1. I'll make sure the stroke is set to black with the size of 0.5. With the selection tool, I'll just drag the stroke while holding shift down and place it at the bottom of the second row from the bottom. Now I'm also going to need another one. So with the selection tool, I'll just drag it up while holding alt plus shift to make a quick duplicate. And for now, I'll just place this roughly in the middle. So I could go on and make more for the other pages, but for now, I'll just keep these. And if I press W on the keyboard to toggle between normal and preview mode, we can see my stroke outlines there. So this lays down the base grid and the fundamental structure that I'm going to build on top. Now we've defined some properties for these stroke objects, I'm going to make a quick object style. So first I'll select one of the strokes, then I'll jump into my object style panel, click on the top right menu, click new style. I'll name this base stroke, click to apply style to selection and click OK. Then I'll select all the other strokes and apply the base stroke object style. So if at any time after creating these strokes, I want to change the size or color, all I will have to do is simply change this one object style and it will change them all automatically. Easy. So looking back at my final pamphlet design, we can see that overall this is a fairly text-heavy document. We do have images, but they generally work around the structure of the type. So next I'm going to look at working with type to lay down all the type elements, which then later we can bring in all the images. So to make it simple and straightforward, we'll start with the largest piece of text, which in this case is on the cover page on page 3 of the spread. Looking back at my final design, we can see that on the cover page we have a specific type format. Now in a previous video we set up a flyer design, In that episode, we learned how to format the text to create this exact header effect and apply character and paragraph styles. One of the awesome things about setting up character and paragraph styles is that these can be copied and pasted from one document to another. So instead of formatting this from scratch, I'm going to grab a sample we prepared earlier. So I'll come back to the event design document. On the marked in collateral page, with the selection tool, I'll select the flyer thumbnail. Now I'll either come to the links panel and click edit original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail, and the document will open up in its own tab. I'll come and select the header type in the top left. I'll copy this, jump back into my pamphlet document. I'll come over to the layers panel and create a new layer. I'll call this type. Make sure it's set to the top. Paste in my text sample, drag it to align to the top left of my inside margin on page 3, and now the text is placed in the document, and if we look over in the paragraph and character styles, you can see we've also carried these across. Nice. So the text is looking great, but right now it's a little too large for this page. So I'll come into the paragraph styles panel and double click on the header style in the header and titles folder. I'll come to the basic character formatting settings, set the size to 33 and the leading to 34, click OK, and the text will resize. Keep in mind that all of this text is assigned to this one paragraph style here, and the second line is defined by this character style. With the second line selected, if I click none in the character styles panel, we will see the formatting removed. And if I click back on the header line 2 style, it will return. All this character style is doing is applying the stroke and the all caps effect. The size and leading is defined by the paragraph style. So with my text sample in place, I'm now going to change it. To do this, I'll come into the Design Expo content deck. This is a content deck that has been created to help you follow along with all the tutorials in this course to get hold of all the text. If you want to get hold of this content deck, click the link in the description or click the link in the course PDF. So I'll come down to the page for the floor plan pamphlet, select the top line for the header, jump back into my InDesign doc and change it. And on this occasion, the second line is the same. So for now, I'll leave it as it is. So with my header now on my cover page, with the selection tool, I can now come and select the horizontal stroke below, and I can drag this up and place it comfortably underneath the text. What I'm aiming for here is to place the stroke below with the same amount of space above the header. I'll align the stroke to one of the baseline rows, and now I have defined the module space below. So looking back at the final design, we can see at the bottom of the page, we have some text going across the bottom. Again, we could set this up from scratch, but to save time, we're going to recycle. I'll jump back into my flyer document, copy the footer text, and paste into my document on the type layer. I'll place in the bottom module space and then click and drag the text frame to fill the space. I'll jump into my content deck, copy the footer text, back into my document, I'll select all and paste. Now, when working with type in InDesign, you'll want to be careful. So I'll come up to type, scroll down and click on show hidden characters. Now, hidden characters in Adobe InDesign are non-printing symbols that represent formatting elements in your text, such as spaces, paragraph breaks, tabs, and line breaks. These characters are essential for understanding the structure and flow of your text, but are invisible by default when working in a document. So right now, I can see there is a paragraph break at the end of my text. I don't want this, so I'll place my cursor at the end and press delete to get rid of that. This is just going to clean up my texture. Now, upon pasting in the footer text, we will also see in the paragraph styles panel, we will have carried across the footer paragraph style. And on this occasion, the text is larger than I want for this document. So with the text selected, I'll come up to the character panel, set the size to 8 points, set the tracking to 300. I'll come into the paragraph style panel, right click on my footer style and click redefine style. Easy. So now I have my text elements on the first page, I can move on to the other pages. To continue, I'm going to look at the first page in the spread and work my way across back to the cover page. So looking back at the final design for the first spread, we can see we have a straightforward title in the top left. So to make it easy, I'll click on my header text on page 3, and while holding Alt and Shift, I'll click and drag left and place on the first page in the top left margin space, and upon release, I will have duplicated that header. I'll jump into the content deck, copy the title text for page 1, back into my document, I'll select all and paste, and I'll be sure to remove the paragraph break at the end. So right now, this text is a lot larger than I'd like it to be. So I'll select the text and up in the control panel, I'll set the size to 18 and the leading to 22. Now over in the paragraph styles panel, we will see a plus icon next to the heading style. I've just created some new formatting. So I'll come up to the top right menu in the paragraph styles panel and click new style. I'll name this style title. Be sure to set the based on to no paragraph. Make sure apply style to selection is checked. I'll click OK and then add a soft return and change the text frame size to fit my text. Easy. So looking back at the final design, on the first page under the title, we have a table on the left hand side listing the speaker lineup. And to the right side of this, we have some mugshots of some of the standout speakers of the day. If I press W to enter into normal mode, we can see how I have structured this layout. With the table taking up 4 columns, we can see how I have structured this layout, with the table taking up 4 columns on the left and the mugshots taking up 2 columns on the right. So back into my document, I'll prepare the space for my table on the left. With the selection tool, I'll click on the stroke on page 1 on the right, and while holding Alt plus Shift, I'll click and drag to the left and place a stroke at the start of the 5th column. This will set the space on the left for my table and the space on the right for my mugshots. Now I've got my title in the top left, I can also bring in a horizontal stroke. With the selection tool, I'll click and drag a horizontal stroke from the 3rd page over into the 1st page, and I'll just place it under the title like so. And that will now create 2 modules on the top, one on the left and one on the right. To create my table, first I'll make sure nothing is selected, and in the paragraph styles panel, I'll make sure I do not have any style selected at all, and I'll click on basic. I'll come over to the tools menu, grab my type tool, and with the type layer selected, I'll click and drag from the top left of my module space across and down to fit into the space on the left. Upon release, I'll come up to table and click insert table. Upon click, a menu will appear. For the rows, I'll set this to 11. For columns, I'll set this to 4 and click OK. By default, when creating a table, you will see a grid with the strokes on the side and top. Next, I'll jump into the content deck, click on the button for the table, and this will reveal a link below. If we click on this, it will open up a Google Sheets doc. Here I can click and drag from the top left cell to select all. I'll copy, and back into my document, I'll select all the frames and paste. With it all still selected, up in the control panel, I'll set the font to 8, and now we can see the contents of my table in my document, and I'll press escape to deselect the text and the table. Nice. So with the default formatting applied to my type, next I'll need to format the type and the table cells. Next, I'll come into the Design Expo Brand Toolkit. With the download folder open, click into folder 4 project, into the Design Expo folder, into folder 1 Media Kit, and open the Expo Brand Kit InDesign file. This is a brand kit document that includes all the style references we are going to include in our publication design. Scrolling down to the second format guide for the type, we can see the formatting instructions for the table. Here we have a solid stroke between the rows with particular fonts applied to the header and the names. So in my document, I'll click to select all the frames with the text inside. Up in the control panel, I'll set the font to base new, and in the drop down, I'll set the font to wide. I'll set the size of the font to 7, and with all the text selected, I'll come down into the paragraph panel and make sure to click off hyphenation. Right now, each cell in this table is the exact same size. What I want to do here is toggle the width of some of the columns to allow some of the content to fit more comfortably. So first, I'll come into the second column. I'll place my mouse cursor over the edge of the second column, and when my mouse cursor changes, I'll click and drag out. I'll place my mouse cursor over the end of the third column and drag in, again for the fourth column, and a little for the first column, until I can fit my table in the left space. And I'll make sure the table fits perfectly inside edge to edge. So next, I'll come up to the control panel and click to align the text into the center of each cell. Then I'll come over and adjust the row height of each row. I'll push this up to 11, and as I do this, you will see the space in the rows change. Okay, so next we're going to address the strokes. So with everything selected up in the control panel, if we look closely, we will see a diagram that represents the selection of the current strokes. What I'll do here is carefully come and click on every stroke, both horizontal and vertical, until it's all blue. Then I'll come over to the stroke size, set this to 0, and we will see all the strokes have disappeared. Next, I'll come back to the stroke diagram and be careful to click on all the blue to set it all back to black to deselect. And then just click on the top, middle, and bottom stroke. Once the top, middle, and bottom stroke is set to blue, I'll come over to the stroke size, set this to 0.5, and we will see all the strokes between the rows will reappear. If I press Escape to deselect the text and the table, if I've done this correctly, I will now see my table sitting nicely in that space, where the strokes between the rows are now sitting seamlessly connected to the left and right grid space. If you find that you can still see some space on the left or the right of your table, you can simply double click back into the table, place your mouse cursor over the edge of one of the columns, and you can click and drag to adjust the width of the overall table to fit more snugly in that space. Nice. So now we have the space sorted. Now to address the fonts. So I'll begin by clicking and dragging down over all the names. Up in the control panel, I'll change the font from wide to semi-bold. I'll click and drag to select the header section. Up in the control panel, I'll change the font from wide to semi-bold and set the font size to 9. Finally, I'll select down on the last column. In this unique instance, because this is a slim column and looks a little awkward there, aligned to the left, I'll also come up and set the type to align center. Lastly, I can click into the text cells and add some soft line breaks to make the text read nicely in the rows. I'll press Escape to deselect the table and text, double click on the bottom middle anchor point to snap the frame to the contents, and that sorts the table. Nice. So looking back at the final design, below the table, we have a piece of type with a highlight effect applied. Now we could create this from scratch, or you guessed it, we could recycle from a previous document. In a previous video, we set up a poster design. In that episode, we learned how to format the text to create this exact label and apply the highlight effect. So instead of formatting this from scratch, I'm going to grab a sample we prepared earlier. So I'll come back to the event design document we opened earlier. On the marketing collateral page, with the selection tool, I'll select the poster thumbnail. Now I'll either come to the links panel and click edit original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail, and the document will open up in its own tab. I'll come and select the label type in the top right. I'll copy this, jump back into my document. I'll make sure the type layer is selected and I'll paste. Now upon pasting, the text appears particularly large. This is because I just copied and pasted some text from a very large poster design into a pamphlet that's a lot smaller. So with the text frame selected, I'll drag it over and place into the space below the table and click and drag to set the text frame to fill the space below. Next, I'll jump into the content deck, copy the highlight text for page 1, back into my document, I'll select all and paste and press Escape to deselect the text and click off to deselect the frame. Right now, the text is very large within that text frame. With nothing selected, I'll come over into the paragraph styles panel. I'll double click on the label style, come across into basic character and formats, set the size to 13 and the leading to 15. Next, I'll click on underline options, set the weight to 20, the offset to -5, click OK, double click into the text frame and remove the paragraph break at the end of the paragraph. Press Escape to deselect the type, come up to the control panel, click to align the text to the center of the frame vertically, right click on the frame, select text frame options, and lastly add a 7mm only to the left indent space. Click OK, and that places the highlight text nicely in that space. However, right now I think the text flows too far across the frame. So with the frame selected, I'll come down into the paragraphs panel and click to add a 10mm right indent, and now that fits perfectly in that space. Nice. So looking back at the final design, the next piece of text follows on after the title in the module space in the top right. So back in the document, I'll grab the type tool and come and click and drag to draw a text box from the top left of the margin space down to the right to fill the module space. Now I'll come into the paragraph styles panel and make sure I have no style selected. I'll click on basic. I'll jump into the content deck, copy the subtitle text for page 1. Back into my document, I'll click into the frame and paste. Remove the paragraph break at the end and press Escape to deselect the text. Next, I'll right click on the frame, select text frame options and add a 7mm only to the left indent space. Click OK, double click into the text and select all, select the eyedropper tool, click on the header text to clone the formatting, then up in the control panel, I'll set the size to 9, the leading to 12, come into the paragraph styles panel, click on the top right menu, select new style, I'll name this subtitle, make sure to set base on to none, click OK, then down in the paragraph panel, I'll set the right indent space to 10mm, and that will fit my text nicely in that space. So looking back at the final design, we can see that there is some formatting applied to that top piece of text. So back into my document, I'll select all the text, Into the paragraph panel, I'll set the space between paragraphs to 2, and that will put some space between the top line and the text below. I'll come into the paragraph styles panel, right click on the subtitle style and redefine style. I'll come up and select day 1, and for this I'll set the font to expanded semi-bold. Now in this instance I'm not going to create a paragraph style, I'm simply going to create a character style. So I'll come over to the character styles panel, hit the top right menu, click create new, I'll name this expanded semi-bold and click OK. Press escape to deselect the text, and that sorts the subtitle. So next comes the profile text for the mugshots. Again, we could create this from scratch, but we already have a sample we created earlier in the flyer. So I'll jump back into the flyer and select the first frame with some profile text inside. I'll copy this, jump back into my pamphlet document, and with the text layer selected, I'll paste. Now on this occasion, I'll place my frame right up against the inside stroke, and I'll drag the text frame right to fill the width of the column space. I'll right click on the text frame, select text frame options, and only add a 7mm left inset space. Click OK, and while holding Shift plus Alt, I'll click and drag down to duplicate below. I'll do this one last time to create a third one, and for now I'll just place my frames inside the space like so. It's not until later when I bring in the image elements I'm going to know where to place these. So for now I'll just leave them here, jump back into the content deck, select the name and profile details for the 2 other profiles. Back in my document I'll update these and just leave the text like it is for now. Now in this instance the paragraph text of these profiles is looking a little small. So over into the paragraph styles panel, we can see a profile paragraph style that has been brought in. I'll double click on this, set the font size to 7, the leading to 9, click OK. I'll double click on the profile header, set this to 9, click OK, and now the profile text is looking good. So now moving on to the back page, we can see we have a lot more text samples, some of which we've already prepared. Here I can click on the text on page 1, press and hold Alt and drag across while holding Shift to duplicate that across in a straight line. Release in the top left, jump back into the content deck, select the content for the title, back into my document, select all and paste, and I'll be sure to remove the paragraph break at the bottom. With my title placed on the back page, with the selection tool I'll make sure the base stroke layer is unlocked. I'll lock the type layer, click on the horizontal stroke on page 1, and while holding Alt plus Shift, I'll drag across to the right to make a duplicate and place on the back page like so. Next, I'll click on the new horizontal stroke, and while holding Alt plus Shift, I'll drag down and place it on the top of the second row from the bottom to line up with the stroke on the cover page. This now defines the space in which I can work with the next type elements below. So next I'm going to lock the base stroke layer, and with the type layer unlocked, I'll come over to the tools panel and click the type tool. I'll make sure in the paragraph styles panel I have no style selected, so I'll click on basic paragraph to set this to default. I'll click to draw a text frame from the top left across to the end of the first column. Upon release I will have a text frame. With the selection tool I'll press and hold Alt plus Shift and drag down to duplicate the text frame immediately below, placing the top of the text frame to the bottom of the text frame above. I'll do this one more time while holding Alt plus Shift. I'll click and drag down a text frame and place this directly underneath the second text frame, where the top of my third text frame touches the bottom of the second text frame. With the selection tool, I'll click and drag over all 3 of my text frames, and I'll drag down to the bottom stroke, and this should resize all 3 text frames together, and now I have 3 text frames on top of each other, filling that space perfectly. Awesome. Now before I start working with text, with all 3 of them selected, I'll come up to the control panel and hit the Align Center vertical button. Then I'll right click and select text frame options, and I'll only add a 7mm inset space to the left, click OK, and with the frame selected, I'll come down into the paragraph panel and add a right indent space of 5mm, and now all 3 of these text frames are ready to place text into. So I'll click into the first frame at the top, jump into the content deck, select the copy for the first row. Back into my document, I'll paste in the text, and I'll be sure to remove the paragraph break at the end. Next, I'll double click into the text frame. I'll select all the text, and with the eyedropper tool, I'll click on the subtitle on the previous page, and this will quickly clone the formatting of that text. Next, I'll just click to select the paragraph of the type below. Then up in the control panel, I'll set the font to wide, the size to 8, and the leading to 11. I'll select the title on the top, set the font size to 14, the leading to 16, and now we have set up some new text formats. So I'll come and select the new title, come over into the paragraph styles panel, click on the top right menu, click down to select new style. I'll call this title 2. Click on base on and make sure this is set to none. Click to apply style to selection and click OK. Next I'll come and select the paragraph below this. I'll come over into the paragraph styles panel and click on the top right menu. Click down to select new style. I'll call this paragraph. Click on base on and make sure this is set to none. Click to apply style to selection and click OK. Now upon doing this, we will now see that the space under the title will be removed. This is because we have applied new formatting and it will no longer apply. To rectify this, I'll select the title text above, and down in the paragraph panel, I'll set the space after to 2 mils. Come into the paragraph styles panel, right click on title 2 and click redefine style to update that. So now I have some nice formatted text in my first text frame. What I can do here is select all, copy the text, click into my next frame below and paste. I'll click into the frame at the bottom and paste. And now I have 3 text boxes with 3 sets of text, which I'm happy with. All I'll have to do now is just jump back into the content deck, select the title for each, and update the paragraph text, and that completes these 3 pieces of text. Easy. So looking back at the file design, we can see that we also have this label text. Back into the document, I'll come over and select the highlight text on the first page, press and hold Alt and click and drag to make a duplicate. I'll jump back into the content deck, select the label text, back into the document and replace the text. On the text frame, I can come into the paragraph panel and remove the 10mm right indent, double click on the bottom middle anchor point to snap the frame to the text, and I'll just place it neatly in the bottom right corner, aligned to the margin space on the right. So looking back at the file design, we can see that at the bottom of the back page, we have some text similar to that on the bottom of the cover page. So I'll come over and click on the footer text frame on the cover page, click and drag while holding Alt over to the next page to duplicate. I'll jump back into the content deck, select the footer, jump back into the document, replace the text, and with it all selected, up in the control panel, I'll set to justify the text to the left instead of center. I'll change the tracking to 150, and this will give me a little bit more space over on the right for some icons I'll be placing in later. Now keep in mind, changing that text, we will now see a plus icon on the paragraph style indicating we have changed it. Next, I'll come up to the top right menu, click this and select on new style, and I'll name this style P2 footer. I'll make sure for base on this is set to none and click OK. So that now completes all the text elements that I will need for the first spread. Quite a lot, right? Now keep in mind what we have just done there is a lot of groundwork. When working in InDesign, it can take some time to build up and establish type formats, though once they are established with paragraph and character styles, duplicating can speed up the workflow. This is the true power of InDesign. So before we move on to the next spread, I'll first have to deal with repetitive elements. If we look back at the file design, we can see that for our 2 spreads, we have a consistent grid. So to help manage repetitive elements, I'm going to use parent pages. So right now in the pages panel, if we look at the top, we have one parent page with a prefix A, which is currently applied to each spread below. So I'll toggle off the visibility of the type layer. I'll unlock the base stroke layer, select all the stroke lines. I'll press Command plus X on Mac or Control plus X on PC to cut. I'll come up and double click on parent page A and press Command plus Shift plus V on Mac or Control plus Shift plus V on PC to paste in place. And if I double click on page 1 in the pages panel, we can see that the strokes are now back and now also on the second spread. Nice. So this is going to make it easier for me to swiftly continue on to the next page. Nice. So now moving on to the next spread, we can see we have a lot more text samples, some of which we've already prepared, so creating this should not take too long. Here I can click on the title on the back page, press and hold Alt and drag down to duplicate that across and release in the top left. I'll jump back into the content deck, select the content for the title, back into my document, select all, paste, and I'll be sure to remove the paragraph break at the end. Next, I'm going to add the indexes that appear under the header down the left side of the page. I'll select on one of my paragraph samples from above and drag the frame down while holding Alt to make a quick duplicate, and I'll expand the frame to fit the width of the space here on the left. I'll jump back into the content deck, and on the page for spread 2, I'll select the first index title for fashion, update the title in my doc, back into the content deck, I'll select the index text, jump back into the document, replace the paragraph text with my new index text, and I'll be sure to remove the paragraph break at the end. Now if we look closely at the end of each line, we can see the paragraph break symbol. So to this text, we will also apply the 2mm space between paragraphs, which we applied to this text earlier. Now looking back at the file design, for the index examples, we have some special formatting applied to align part of the text to the left and part of the text to the right with these dots in between. So I'll jump back into the InDesign Export Brand Toolkit, and on the format guide for the type, we can see the formatting instructions for the index. Here we have wide medium on the left, light on the right with dots between. So to set this index up is pretty straightforward. The first thing we will need to do is place our mouse cursor at the end of the exhibitor before the word booth, come up to type, down to special character, across and click into other and click on right indent tab. Upon click, this will add a space between the text, which will push the text between the tab to the right like so. And if we look carefully between the spaces, we can see a symbol which represents the indent tab space. Now it's a case of inserting this indent to the text, but this time we can use the keyboard shortcut. So I'll place my mouse cursor again between the exhibitor and the word booth in the next line, and this time press Shift plus Tab, and I'll do this for the lines below. And now we have the beginnings of our index. Nice. Next, I'll select the index text, and this is where the magic happens. So I'll come into the paragraph styles panel, up to the top right, click down and select new paragraph style. I'll name this style index, make sure based on is set to none. I'll click to apply style to selection and click on the preview tab. So up at the basic character and formats, I'll set the font to wide medium, I'll set the size to 9, and on indent and space, I'll leave the space between paragraphs set to 2. Next, I'll click on tabs, and in here, we can set the dots between the spaces. So first, I'll click into the tab above to drop down an arrow. Then in the leader space, I'll add a full stop and press spacebar 3 times after it, and click into the field above. Upon doing this, we will now see the preview on the text below. I'll click OK, and now we have the index almost complete. To finish off, I'll change the font of the booth number. So I'll select the booth number, change the font to light. I'll come into the character styles panel, create a new style, name this light, make sure to click to apply style to selection, click OK, select the rest of the booth numbers and set the character style to light. And that completes the first index. So currently with the text frame selected, we can see that down in the paragraph panel, we have a right indent which is set to 10. In this instance, I'll come in and set this to 7 to match the margin space on the left, and now the space left and right is the same. Nice. So with one complete, making the rest is easy. So I'll click on the text frame, and while holding Alt plus Shift, I'll click and drag down to duplicate. I'll jump back into the content deck, select the second index title for product design, update the title in my document, back into the content deck, I'll select the index text, jump back into the document, replace the index text, and remove the paragraph break at the bottom. Now upon pasting in the text, you may notice that the formatting is not the same. When replacing the text, it won't automatically apply the formatting, so we will need to quickly enter into the index and quickly sort out the formatting. So like earlier, place the mouse cursor before the word booth, press Shift plus Tab, and that will apply the space between and apply the dots. I'll do this for the lines below and we'll have the index. Next, I'll just come and quickly select the booth number and set the character style to light, and that sorts the second index. So I'll do the same again, duplicate the top text box down, I'll jump back into the content deck, select the third index file, update the title in my document, back into the content deck, select the index text, back into the document, replace the index text, remove the paragraph break at the end, and using the same techniques as earlier, add the indent space with Shift plus Tab and change the booth text to light. So now I'll select all 3 frames, which right now are the same size, and click the bottom middle anchor and drag them up to just adjust the height together. So for the last time, I'll duplicate the bottom index down, jump into the content deck, select the 4th index title, update the title in my document, select the index text and replace it, remove the paragraph break at the end, and using the same techniques as earlier, add the indent space with Shift plus Tab, and change the booth text to light. So now I have my 4th index. In this instance, this index includes less rows than the 3 above. So I'll adjust the height of the text frame, then I'll click to select all of the indexes, and click and drag the middle anchor point down to fit them all perfectly into the space like so. Perfect. So the next piece of text on the page is this large display text. Again, we could create this from scratch, or to speed this up, we can use a sample we created previously. So back into the brand toolkit, I'll scroll to the graphic collage page. With the selection tool, I'll select the collage thumbnail. Now I'll either come to the links panel and click edit original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail, and the document will open up in its own tab. I'll click to select the type sample. Into my doc, I'll make sure to have the text layer selected, and I'll paste this in. I'll make sure the ref point is set to the top left. Press S and hold Shift to scale the type frame down and fit more comfortably in the space. I'll click into the word graphic and change to explore, then change the word design to exhibits. I'll select the word exhibits. I'll select the stroke color and set this to black, and set the stroke size to 0.5. Then I'll select all the type, set the size to 45, and then scale and position in the space comfortably. Now in this instance, I do not want this stroke on the left to go all the way up to the top of the page. So by pressing and holding Command plus Shift on Mac or Control plus Shift on PC, I'll click on the stroke and this will override the parent page object. And I'll click on the top stroke and drag down to place under the horizontal stroke. So moving on to the next page, at the top we have another sample of text with the highlight effect. So I'll come and select the highlighted text on the first page on the first spread, click and drag down while holding Alt to duplicate. Up in the control panel, I'll set the align to the top of the frame vertically and place it in the top left. I'll jump back into the content deck, select the highlighted text for page 5, update the text in my document, and remove the paragraph break at the end. In this instance, we can see some hyphenation applied. So with the text selected, I'll come into the paragraph panel, click to turn off hyphenation, and into the paragraph styles panel, I'll right click to redefine. And I'll change the size of the type frame to fit the text in more comfortably. So now we are almost done with all the text elements in this pamphlet. The next lot of text is for the navigation section below. And creating these is pretty simple. Again, we can select the paragraph sample from the first spread and duplicate it down while holding Alt to make a duplicate. And here I'll place under the stroke like so. Now looking back at the final doc, we can see something a little different here. In this instance, we have icons placed to the left of the header with a bigger space between. To do this, we will just have to tweak some of the formatting. So first I'll replace the text. I'll jump back into my content deck, select the title, update the text in my document, and back into the content deck, I'll select the paragraph, update the text in my document, and remove the paragraph break at the end. Next, I'll place the mouse cursor at the start of the title. Down in the paragraph styles panel, I'll set a left indent to 18 and add the space after to 7 mils. And this will put a lot more space to the left and push the paragraph text further down below. Next, I'll place my mouse cursor before the word visit hub and press Shift plus Enter to add a soft line break. I'll change the font to expanded medium and set the size to 10. Then over in the character styles panel, I'll click to add a new style. I'll call this hub label. Make sure to apply style to selection and click OK. So that's the first one. Next, I'll click and drag down while holding Alt plus Shift to drag in a straight line to duplicate, and I'll do the same again until I have 3 samples. I'll jump back into the content deck, select the titles for the next 2, update the text in my document, and back in the content deck, select the paragraphs for the next 2, update the text in my document, and remove the paragraph break at the end of both. Next, I'll place my mouse cursor before each hub label and press Shift plus Enter to add a soft return. Select the text and choose the hub label character style, and that completes the 3 pieces of navigation text. So right now I have the horizontal stroke going across the bottom of my page. For this page, I do not need it. So by pressing and holding Command plus Shift on Mac or Control plus Shift on PC, I'll click on the stroke, and this will then override the parent page object. But on this occasion, I will select the big stroke around the outside. I'll press Command L on Mac or Control L on PC to lock that object. I'll press and hold Command plus Shift on Mac or Control plus Shift on PC, and again click on the stroke, and now I'll just press Delete to remove that one. Next, I'll select all 3 text frames above and drag the middle anchor point down to fit them all perfectly in that space on the left. Nice. Next, I'll press and hold Command plus Shift on Mac or Control plus Shift on PC and click on the stroke on the right hand side of the page to override the parent page object. I'll click and drag while holding Shift across and into the middle to duplicate the stroke, and again press and hold Command plus Shift on Mac or Control plus Shift on PC, and this time click on the horizontal stroke to override the parent page object. I'll click and drag across to meet the vertical stroke. I'll lock the type layer, click and drag while holding Shift plus Alt down and duplicate the horizontal stroke between each text frame. until I now have the stroke line on the left and the stroke line in between. So while I'm at it, I'll press and hold Command plus Shift on Mac or Control plus Shift on PC and click all the other strokes inside the space on the right to override them and remove them until I have a clear space over on the right hand side. However, what I'll do next is duplicate the horizontal stroke across, drag it to the full width of the space on the right, and drag down and place to align on the top of the fourth row from the bottom. So the last piece of text for the pamphlet is for the key below the map. Here we can see that there is what appears to be a small grid of icons with text. So to create this, we are going to use a table. So first I'll come over to the title on the far left, click and drag while holding Alt plus Shift to drag it over in a straight line. I'll place it in the top left corner of the second column on the second page, double click into the text and type in map. Press Escape to deselect and reduce the text frame. Next, I'll use the type tool and draw a type frame to the approximate size of that space below. Upon release, I'll come up to Table and click to Insert Table. Upon click, a menu will appear. For the rows, I'll set this to 2. For columns, I'll set this to 9 and click OK. By default, when creating a table, you will see a grid with the strokes on the side and top. So I'll click on the selection tool to deselect the table and select the frame. Up in the control panel, I'll click to align the table to the center of the frame vertically. I'll right click, come up to frame options and add a 7mm inset space only to the left and click OK. So with the type tool, I'll click to select the first column in the table, and up in the control panel, I'll set the column width to 20. For the next one, I'll set this to 10. For the next one, I'll set this to 40. For the next one, I'll set this to 10. For the next one, I'll set this to 35. For the next one, I'll set this to 10. For the next one, I'll set this to 35. For the next one, I'll set this to 10. And for the next one, I'll set this to 35. Next, I'll click to select every cell in the table, and up in the control panel, I'll set the top, bottom, left and right cell inset to 0, and I'll push the cell height up to 10. So what I have done there is create a table that is going to allow me to paste in certain elements that will fit inside neatly. So I'll click into the first cell and type in key, and then jump into the content deck, click on the button for the key table. This will reveal the link below. If we click on this, it will open up in a Google Sheets doc. Here I can click and drag to select the column of the text. I'll select the first column, I'll copy, and back into my document, I'll select the third column. I'll make sure I have no paragraph or character style selected, and I'll paste. Next, I'll come up and add a 2mm left cell inset to push a bit of space on the left. With the 2 cells selected, I'll copy, and then select the other frame in the table and paste. Basically, what I'm doing there is pasting in the formatting I just created, so I don't have to do that over and over again. So I'll quickly jump back and forth from my content deck and into my doc and paste in the remainder of the map key text. And once it's all in, I'll select every cell, and up in the control panel, I'll click to align to the center inside the cells. So with all the cells selected, I'll come and click on the type icon under the fill and stroke, then come up and change the font to base new, set the font to wide medium, and set the size to 9. Next, I'll select the word key, and with the eyedropper tool, I'll click into the title in the top left of the spread, and this will clone the title format. And that completes the type formatting for my table, and that completes all the text in my spread. So at this point, when all the text is in the document, I then like to start thinking about color. Looking back at my final design, you can see the color approach I took. So back into the document, if we look in the swatches panel, we can see that we have some of the brand colors copied over from some of the elements that we pasted into the document earlier. But to continue, I'm going to need all of the colors. Now back into the brand toolkit doc, I could copy and paste the colors from the brand at a glance page, but to make it even easier, you can import the color swatch. So back to our document, come up to the top of the swatches panel, click the menu and come down and click on load swatches. Upon click, you will see a window appear. I'll navigate to the download folder, click into folder 4 project, into the design export folder, click into folder 1 media kit, into the assets folder, into folder 5 color, and click to open the design export palette document. Upon click, we will now see the colors present in our swatches panel in a folder. Nice. So now we will need to be careful. Now we have lots of duplicates, which can happen when you paste in elements with the same color multiple times. Here I'll come and select on the duplicates, right click, select delete and replace them with the new colors. And I may need to quickly rename some of the swatches to clean this up here. So now I could come and select the text elements and the stroke elements and change the colors individually, but now I have created some styles, it'll be far easier to change the color there. So I'll come into the paragraph styles panel, and starting from the top, I'll work my way down, clicking into each style and make sure the text color is set to midnight. Next, I'll come into the character styles panel, double click into the hub label and change the fill color to Ultravio. So next for the label color. On the second spread, we will keep the default Solaro, but for the first spread, I want to change this. So I'll come and select the text in the label. Down in the character panel, I'll click the top right menu and click on underline options. In this instance, I'll change the highlight to Lumo and set the tint to 20% and click OK. Next, I'll come into the character styles panel and hit the top right menu and click new style. I'll name this Lumo. Make sure to apply style to selection and click OK. Now for the back page, I always want this highlight to be Lumo. So now I can come and select the text, click on the Lumo character style, and the highlight color will change. Nice. Next, I'll come into the object styles panel, double click on the base stroke style and change the stroke color to Ultravio. Next, I'll come and select the word speakers in the display text, and with the stroke color selected, I'll change the color to Ultravio. So next comes the tables. So I'll click to select every frame in the table. I'll come into the tools menu, and under the fill and stroke color, I'll click on the T icon to select the text within the table. I'll click the fill color and set this to midnight. With the frames still selected, I'll now click the button next to the text to format the container. I'll come up to the control panel and look closely at the table stroke diagram. I'll be sure to only select the horizontal lines on the vertical. Once the horizontal lines are in blue and all the other lines are in black, I'll select the stroke color and set this to Ultravio. Press escape to deselect, click off, and now the table is looking good. So back down to the second spread, I'll click into the table and again select every cell. I'll make sure the text icon is selected under the fill and stroke in the tools menu. And with the fill color selected, I'll set the color of the text to midnight. So that now takes care of all the type elements. Looking back at the file doc, we can see that some of the text frames have solid color. Now some color is applied directly to the text frames and others are colored blocks in the background for various reasons. To begin, I'll come to the first spread. I'll lock the type and stroke layer, and with the base stroke grid layer selected, I'll click on the rectangle frame tool and click and drag a frame to fill the space at the bottom of the cover page under the footer and set the color to Solaro. Next, I'll click and drag this block to the left while holding Alt plus Shift to drag in a straight line and place under the footer space on the back page and set the color to Platform. So that's the solid blocks of color. Next, I'll unlock the type layer, select the first paragraph text frame, and with the fill color selected, I'll set this to Solaro. I'll select the frame below and set this to Fluoro, and I'll select the frame below and set this to Ultravio. So that covers the first spread. Again, on the second spread, we have some further colored frames. I'll select the frame with the first index and set this to Ultravio. I'll select the frame below and set this to Solaro, set the frame below to Fluoro, and set the last frame to Lumo. So right now, these colors are particularly vibrant, so I'd like to dial them down a little. So with all the frames selected, up in the swatches panel, I'll set the tint to 80%, and I'll also do this for the back page. And this now completes all the color elements in the pamphlet so far. So looking back at the file design, on the cover page, I have a logo mark in the top right, a collage composition in the middle space below. On the back page, we have an image. We have speaker profile images on the far left page, and on the second spread, we have a map and some icons. So to begin, I'll start with the logo mark symbol. And to make this easy, I'll jump into the brand toolkit. If we scroll to the logo page, we can see a sample of the logo mark. So I'll click to select this, copy, and back into the document. I'll first come over to the layers panel, create a new layer and call this base images. I'll make sure to place this layer at the bottom. I'll paste the logo into the document, place it into the top right of the margin on the cover page. And because it's a vector group, I'll place my mouse cursor in the bottom left and click and drag while holding Shift and scale the logo mark to fit 3 rows in the baseline grid. Easy. So next I'm going to place the image into the module space below. Looking back at the file design, the image on this page will be one of the collage compositions we created earlier in this course. Back into the brand toolkit, if we scroll down to the brand asset style page, we can see we have links to collage samples. With the selection tool, I'll select the collage thumbnail. Now I'll either come to the links panel and click edit original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail and the document will open in its own tab. Here we have a series of collage samples we worked on in a previous episode. If you have not watched that episode and you're curious to learn how to create digital collages like these, you can jump back to the previous video. Or if not, you can just open this document from the download folder where you can follow along. For my pamphlet design, I'm going to use the third collage composition. Now over in the layers panel, I've organized this document into separate layers to make it easy to work with. In this instance, I'm taking everything but the type. So in the layers panel, I'll toggle the visibility of the type layer off, and now I can just see the visual elements. With the selection tool, I'll click and drag over the elements, copy these, come into my document, make sure I'm on the base images layer and paste. When pasted in, you may see elements appear desaturated. If we come up to edit, scroll down, click on transparency blend space, we can set this to RGB, and we will now see the image colors as intended. Next, I'll take a few minutes to reposition the elements inside the module space like so, and that will complete the image in that space. Nice. So on the back page, I have an image that fills the space to the right of the text blocks. So I'll come into the Tools menu, grab the rectangle frame tool, draw a frame to fit that space and press Command+D on Mac or Control+D on PC to place an image. I'll navigate into the Download folder, into Folder 4 Project, into the Design Expo folder. I'll click into Folder 1 Media Kit, into the Assets folder, into the Image Treatment folder, into the Grayscale folder, and open the Design Expo GS Attendees 002 PSD, and the image will be placed inside. So right now the image is particularly large in the frame. Next I can right click on the frame, come down to Fit In, and click Fill Frame Proportionally. With the Direct Selection tool, I can click on the image in the frame and move it left and right to adjust which part of the image we can see. And here we can see the bounding box representing the image inside the frame. I'll click on the middle right anchor, and while holding Shift+Alt, I'll click and drag to scale the image down or up to fit within the frame. Nice. So next comes the profile image. So back in the toolkit, if we scroll down further, we can see a speaker page, which includes a variety of pre-composed graphic compositions of speaker mugshots with shapes behind them. Each one of these samples is a small group of layer elements. In the background, we have a shape with a stroke, and on top is an image of a person's profile cut out. For the first pamphlet, we're going to go with Isabella, Julian, and Maya. So while holding Shift, I'll select these three, copy and just paste them into my new document. I'll make sure the reference point is set to the top left, press S to activate scale, place my mouse cursor towards the bottom right and drag up while holding Shift to scale them down, and I'll place them over on the right, and here I may have to toggle off the visibility of the type layer to see them. I'll place them over on the right, scale down in the space, bring back the type layer, and adjust the profile shots to fit with the type elements. Next, I'll come to the second spread, copy a sample of the horizontal stroke, paste up into the first spread, place between the top two and duplicate one down, and adjust the spacing of the elements until it's balanced in that space, like so. So on the back page, we have some social media icons to go along with the footer text. Back into the toolkit, if we scroll to the icons page, here we can grab the 4 social media icons, copy and paste them into our document, scale down and position them next to the footer text. So on the second spread, I have a big map image to fill the space on the right. So I'll come into the Tools menu, grab the rectangle frame tool, draw a frame to fit that space, and press Command+D on Mac or Control+D on PC to place an image. I'll navigate into the Download folder, into Folder 4 Project, into the Design Expo folder, click into Folder 1 Media Kit, into the Assets folder, into the Maps folder, and open the Expo Map AI document. And the image will be placed inside. So right now the image is particularly large in that frame. Next, I can right click on the frame, come down to Fitting, and click Fill Frame Proportionally. With the Direct Selection tool, I can click on the image in the frame, scale down further, and move to fit the image inside the frame more comfortably. Nice. So next to the map, we have icons that fit inside the spaces next to the titles. So back into the Brand Kit document, I'll scroll down to the Icons and Strokes page, and here I have some samples of icons. I'll select the magnifying glass icon, copy, jump back into my document, paste, scale down and place next to the top piece of text. I'll do the same, back into the toolkit, I'll select the networking icon, copy, jump back into my document, paste, scale down and place next to the next piece of text. Back into the toolkit, I'll select the speaker icon, copy, jump back into my document, paste, scale down and place next to the last piece of text. So with my 3 icons placed into the document, I'll set the color of the first one to platform, the next one to fluoro, and the last one to solaro. Now on this occasion, I'll select the circle for the second icon, come up to Object, down to Convert Shape, and set this to Rectangle. So the last images to add to this pamphlet are the icon images in the Map key. So now it can be a little awkward placing an image directly into a table. So without anything selected, I'll press Command D on Mac or Control D on PC to place an image. I'll navigate to the download folder, into folder 4 project, into the Design Expo folder, click into folder 1 Media Kit, into the Assets folder, into the Icons folder, and open the Design Expo Icons Midnight AI. So here I'll click and drag over the icon space just to get an idea of how I want to fit it in the frame. Upon release, I'll drop in my first icon. With the icon selected, I'll press Command X to cut, then I'll double click to enter into the table. In the second cell from the left, I'll paste and we will place the icon into the cell. I'll click into the cell below, paste again, and now we have 2 icons. Next, I'll click to select both cells, and up in the control panel, I'll click to align center horizontally. With the cells still selected, I'll copy and come and select the other cells and paste to add the icons. And now we have a setup here where everything is neatly placed. Now with the direct selection tool, I'll click on the icon under the first. I'll press Command D on Mac or Control D on PC to place an image. I'll navigate into the download folder, into folder 4 project, into the Design Expo folder, click into folder 1 Media Kit, into the Assets folder, into the Icons folder, and click on the Design Expo Icons Midnight AI file. Now this time, before clicking open, I'll click to show options. Now upon clicking, a menu will appear. Here I can click through the Illustrator dock to choose a specific icon to include. In this instance, I'll choose the baby changing icon, click open, and that will update the icon there. Now it's just a case of using the direct selection tool and clicking on each icon, pressing Command D on Mac or Control D on PC, and with the show options checked, I can choose to replace each icon with a new one. Nice! So now the table is complete, I can finally click to select each cell in the table. I'll come up to the stroke diagram in the control panel. I'll click to make sure every stroke is set to blue. Then over in the stroke size, I'll set this to 0. Click off to deselect the table. And now that's looking perfect down there in that space, which now completes all the images in my pamphlet. So looking back at my final design, we can see that on top of the images layer and some of the pages, I am also using some texture samples from the brand toolkit as part of the visual brand aesthetic. So again, I'll jump into the brand toolkit and scroll to the texture samples page. Here I'll grab the square grid sample from the document over on the left, and back into my document, I'll come and create a new layer. I'll name this texture, make sure it's placed just above the grid layer, paste in the texture, place my mouse cursor in the bottom right and drag while holding shift to scale up and position on top of the left of the background image. Back into the toolkit dock, I'll select another sample, paste it into my document, scale down, and on this occasion I'll change the fill color to fluoro and place this down on the bottom right of the top image. So now I have some samples in my document. I'll select the square grid I pasted in first and come down to the next spread, paste and position, and that completes all the visual elements in the pamphlet, and that completes the layout of our pamphlet design. So before we close off this tutorial, there is one last thing that is quite important to keep in mind, and that is style management. In this video, we created various styles, and we also pasted in some styles from other documents. If we look in the paragraph styles panel, right now we can see a bunch and some folders that have been carried across. Now we could just leave it as is and move on, but if we want to be really organized, we can manage these styles. This can make the whole process and workflow of using InDesign and styles easier. What we're going to do now is just manage these and clean it all up. First, in the paragraph styles panel, I'll drag the paragraph style into the paragraph folder. I'll drag the index style into the paragraph folder and readjust the order in which the folders are stacked from top to bottom like so. Into the character styles panel, I'll create a new folder. I'll call this weights, make sure it's set to the bottom, and I'll drag in the character weight styles. I'll create a new folder, call this label colors, make sure it's set to the bottom and drag in the label color styles. Into the object styles panel, I'll create a folder called strokes, drag in my stroke styles, and here we're creating a clear and organized hierarchy of our styles. Nice. So once you're happy with your design, we can now export this out. Simply come up to File and click on Export, or press Command+E on Mac or Control+E on PC. I'll navigate to a project folder I saved previously in the course, click into the Publish folder, select the PDFs folder. I'll name the file Design Expo Pamphlet, and down in the format, I'll choose Adobe PDF for print. I'll click Save and up will pop another menu. Here I'm going to make sure that for Adobe PDF preset, high quality print is selected. For pages, I'll select all. Now on this occasion, it's really important you click to select spreads. I'll make sure that View PDF after saving is checked. For view, I'll set this to fit width. I'll come over to the left and click on marks and bleeds. and click only on crop marks. For bleed, I'll set this to use document bleed settings and then click export. InDesign will do its thing and up will pop Acrobat Reader. I'll click the Pages tab, and here we can see we have a PDF document with 2 pages, front and back. With 2 pages, the front and back spreads. Around the outside we can also see the trim marks, and this is where the printer will trim the pamphlet after printing to ensure an accurate cut, and also see the lines where to fold the pamphlet. This is now good to send off to the printer. Perfect. So that's how you can create an event floor plan map in InDesign and incorporate styles to make it very flexible to customize and drag styles in from other documents. Now, another common document used at an event is a lanyard. A lanyard at an event serves to identify attendees, staff, and exhibitors, while providing easy access to badges, tickets, and important information. In the next video, we are going to look at how we can create a lanyard in InDesign. So see you in the next video.